My name is Jimmy Maxwell, and I'm chatting with Staxx.
Welcome to this episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Jimmy Maxwell.
And I could hear him. He had already got his shoes off, and he was wearing shorts. And I could hear him change directions like he was going to come over and help me. And I just couldn't let that happen because I knew how close I was to panic. And I would have drowned us both, So I turned around to tell him, yeah, hey, man, don't, stay back from me. And I swear to God, I stood up in water that was this deep at that point, and I was so happy. I couldn't believe it, and he's like, he's actually further in than I am. And, and he stood up, he didn't even know it, but he was in water, to his waist. And I'm like, man, it's, we were just so freaking happy. And, anyway, long story short, we made it out of there. And
so you could have drowned in water that was like 3 feet and you didn't even know.
Yeah, well, it was deeper than that all the way across, I promise you. But at some point I made it far enough on there where yeah, you're right, I probably could have. But once I started going down, I'm sure I would have hit the ground. But I just was, man, that was one of the most. I was relieved. I was relieved.
Where do you go from there? Like, do you just try to find a ride? Like, are you?
Yeah, well, his people lived in Tulsa. This was in Tulsa. The thing where we were at was in Sand Springs, but it's not too far from Tulsa. So we walked the railroad tracks all the way down till we got to a phone, which was the west side of Tulsa, and he had his people come pick us up. Yeah.
So how long do you stay free until they get you again?
Well, that time I stayed out till I was 2 weeks from aging out.
So did they send you back just for 2 weeks?
They sent me back for 2 weeks. Isn't that crazy?
You would think that they would give you more charges for escaping, right?
Well, I mean, they couldn't. I mean, it's like they couldn't. I broke a guard's nose down there one time, and he went straight to the cops and told them he was trying to file charges on me. And they said, well, what do you want us to do with him? He's already in the deepest, he's already in the worst boys home you got,
Yeah, like
put him in lockup, I mean. But I mean, I guess they could have hit me with as an adult, but they were. I mean, at that place at that time, and they weren't. I mean, there was murderers and all kinds of sick and twisted people in that place. There, they reserved it for But what got me there was that insurrection, that we had. That was what made me there. But so there was not really anywhere else to put me, other than make me an adult. And what are you going to make me an adult for hitting some guy,
So what's it like to walk out of the boys' home at 18? And what are your plans? Where do you go?
Man, I'll tell you, I had no direction at that time. None really. I was everything was a party. Everything was, I had nothing at that point in time. I just got out, picked up right, where I was at, went back to Diamond and drank as much and drank as hard and did whatever we could get our hands on and just partied, until I ended up catching another case, but I was an adult at that time. So
was it a lot different now, catching a case and going to the adult prison? And was it a really bad charge that you went to for the first time to adult prison?
No, actually, the first time, it was kind of a bad charge, but I went to trial. My first felonies were I had my girlfriend at the time had been shoplifting, and the guy at the store tried to grab her. You know what I mean? And I shoved him back, and I told her to get out of there. And then I just kind of guarded her back until she was good and gone. And then I had still had cigarettes on the counter, which I was paying for. And I went back, and they were like trying to tell me, "Oh no, you're waiting for the cops." Well, now I realize that they've called cops. I'm like, so I take off, and the butcher gets after me, and they get out. Anyway, long story short, a big fight ensues, and I get away. I whoop the butcher and the stock boy.
Are you working out? Are you big at the time?
Well, I'd been working in the oil field, and I worked out when I was in the boys' homes, and like I said, my boxing coach, he would I still smoked at that time, but he was always on me about not smoking, and staying fit and actually keeping myself out of trouble and all that, of course. But I didn't listen to much of that, but I had always kind of stayed fit, as far as that goes, because that boxing and all that interested me a lot, and I was pretty decent at it for a kid.
So you whooped him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and so anyway, I got away, and then and so the cops had been looking for me. You're talking about a little small town, right? And one of them saw me on a Sunday, and I saw him, and when we're just cruising around, sitting on the lots and whatever, and I was sitting between my girlfriend and this other girl in the front seat of a car, and I saw the cops go by, and I was like, "Get me the fuck out of here," and I saw their brake lights come on, and so anyway, the other cop come in. They got me cornered, but I had a knife in my hand. It was just a little knife, and I was working on her rearview mirror for it because it broke off, and I was fixing it. And but when the cops came up, I still had that in my hand, and my girlfriend, she spun around in the seat so I could shoot out there, and I ran into the one that ran up on me, and I jerked away from him. And there's the two that come out from that car that was in the. And I saw the brake lights. They swooped around, and they're running up, and I just bowled into them, like a linebacker. We all went down on the ground, and long story short, one of them got cut on the hand, one of them got cut on the neck. Not seriously, but enough, you cut an officer, a police, it's pretty serious regardless if you nick them or not. But honestly, I really didn't know. I wasn't trying to cut them. I just had it in my hand, and I wasn't letting go of it. I could have let go of it. I heard the other officer yelling, "The son of a bitch has got a knife." I heard all that, but and next thing you know, I was up and I was running, but I really didn't think about having a knife in my hand. That's just the truth. Until I tripped over the railroad tracks. They're yelling at me. They're going to shoot me and whatever. And I just didn't. I just got lucky that they didn't. It's a smaller town, and I guess I just got lucky, or maybe because my back was to them and I was running away. But I didn't realize that I'd actually done any damage until I'd gotten away, and I was sitting at home, and I looked at the knife and saw that there was blood on it. So that was my first felonies. But I took it to trial, and I told them exactly what I just told you. I wasn't dishonest about it. I said I didn't know I had the knife. It was never intentional, and that's the charge. You're charged with intent. Assault and battery with a dangerous weapon with the intent to do bodily harm. And I was young enough still that the jury and them didn't see an old, incorrigible criminal. They saw a high school kid, and so they did find me guilty, but they gave me 6 months for each officer, even on a felony, and I had to do a year in the county jail.
So they kind of lowered the charges.
Well, the charges still haunt me today because they didn't lower them to not be a felony. I don't know how that works. because they definitely used it when they got me for armed career criminal this last time. They still used it against me for that, which ups a gun charge to 15 to whatever.
And it's assault on an officer, so it makes it even worse because they look at that like, oh, he's dangerous. The police are gonna get hurt if they deal with him, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they don't like people that do that.
No, they don't. And hell, I don't even blame them, really. But I mean, but like I said, at that time in my life, I wasn't thinking the way that that normal people think. I was just thinking, I was just a wild ass fucking kid, that'd been in a lot of trouble and felt like I was mad at the world, so.
No intentions on getting your life together back then.
I don't remember any intentions.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, back then we were just, I don't know, man. It was, I don't think I even started growing up until my first child, was born, to be honest. I mean, all the way up to that point, and that was when I was in my 20s. Up to that point, I was just, gangster, drug dealer, dope house robber, all that, and convict, obviously. But but when I had my first child, things started changing. My mentality started changing, and and as I got older and they got older, it took me a long time to still get something in my head that was, like anything sort of like, hey, let me, I better start thinking about life. And then one day, I think it was not this sentence, but the last sentence, and I had gotten 50 years for 5 grams of dope. That's how bad they hated me at this point, and I ended up getting it cut to a 25, but it took me 12 years to do it. And I had a 5-year federal case to do for a gun after that. But I was buried in the H block, which is our Supermax here in Oklahoma. It's attached to McAllister, but it has no windows. It's a concrete cell, half underground. And that's where they take you to warehouse you. I've got friends that's been out there for 20 years. And, and I learned, you see that they don't, at that point, when you make it to that point, they don't care. They just want to keep you away from everybody else. I'd already done a lot of dirt. I'd already done a lot of stuff, and I had worked my way up to that point, and where they just were ready to just keep me in there. And I started looking through my photo album, and I had my ex-wife had sent me pictures of my kids, and 2 of them were, well, one of them was 4. My daughter was 4. My son was just a baby at the time. But by the time I got to the end of my photo album, they were teenagers. And I was like, because I did, they were, well, my son was not a teenager, but my daughter was. And they were growing up without me. And I don't know. I just realized that, once you get to that point, if you don't do something for yourself, you don't change something, you're not going to ever have any kind of life. And you know what? I decided I wanted to have life. And it just it just hit me. And I was like, I have not given anything to my family, my kids. I've given everything to this prison, everything to the people, and to the whole, to this lifestyle, which is just, all about me and all about, and I go and I talked to some friends of mine that had been there, that I'd known for 20 years, the older school of cats and shit. And there were several of them down there with me. And I was like, this is crazy, man. I was looking through my photo album and I'm like, this is like, it's really something that's kind of touched me. And that, like they're, yeah, brother, that's cool. That's, but what can we do next? What can we, how can we get this in? How can we do this? And how can we, what can we do to control this? And I realized that that's all they thought about. That was where their head was at. And if I didn't do something, that's what was going to be. That's where I was going to be. And it just made such an impact on me that it started changing something inside of me. And I just started evolving from that point. That was the very beginning of where I'm at today, to be honest. I'm not saying that was that was 20 years ago, but it took long, but
you still had to go through things to get to the point you're at today.
Yeah. And, it still took a long time to get myself, moved around in that mindset. But even as I did, and I started moving myself around in that mindset and becoming a different person that was, that actually had empathy and caring about, my life and about other people's lives. And, it took a long time. I'd already developed this reputation and this, what the people that were in charge of my life and the administrations and all that, they now have a picture of me that is, that they're not going to let go of. It took a long time. It took me so long to get out of prison this last time. It's because, and I don't think I even caught a case the last decade, of any type, while I was in prison, not a write-up, nothing. And I worked the whole time for the welding deal out at Unicor I was in federal prison. And, it took every minute of that time to get them to convince, to where I finally had people that were like, you know what, I think he's really not going to fuck up. I think he's changed. Yeah. It just takes it. This nothing's really easy. Nothing's ever given to you. And still today, the judges and all them don't give me any slack. And the prosecutor, as soon as I filed for a compassionate release, came back with, he come back with an excerpt from my book, American Outlaw, where it goes, dink, dink, dink was the sound of the baseball bat coming down, breaking one of Randy's bones with every ringing swing. They highlighted that and put that in my, that's his response to me saying, hey, I've changed. Even though the book title says American Outlaw, Price of Pride, Price of My Pride, it obviously in the title, it shows that I have had some kind of change of heart, and I'm showing my evolution of where I came from and where I finally got to. And, but that's the battle you have. It's an uphill battle. Once they believe these things about you, trying to convince them that you're not that way. And granted, there's people that screw it up for everybody. There's guys that finally make it out of prison. They go out and do some heinous ass, and then it just comes back and bites us all in the ass.
That happens all the time.
All the time. And I know, so you can't really even, you can't even be freaking pissed off about it. You can, but because, I know where I'm at, but you can't really, nobody else really knows what's going on in your head.
But you got to show people where you've been so that they don't make the same mistakes you made.
Amen to that, brother. That's kind of the whole point of everything that we're doing now. Yeah. The books, whatever, because at this point in my life, I don't want to use, yes, there's a lot of violence. There's a lot of violence as an adult. I'm not promoting myself as a badass or a violent person. But I do know that the only people that are like-minded, that are still stuck in that world and still stuck in those things and their thoughts, the only people they listen to are people that they can look at and go, that guy right there is somebody I can listen to, because he's been the same guy the whole time. He's not turned into some kind of freaking, I don't have anything, that's why I am the person that I am, and people still respect me, is because I'm the same guy. I live the same rules. As far as I don't have the same mindset, I'm not going to hurt nobody. And I don't promote that. at all, but I still keep myself, as
A set
far
of
as
standards, right? That you
the
live
standards
by.
are the same. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
going to talk about things I'm not supposed to talk about. I'm not going to put anybody else down. I'm not going to go and say, I'm not, there's just the things the things that I do and are all geared for the better, so that I might be able to help somebody else. That's not to say that I ain't trying to help myself too. I mean, because it all works it all works around in a circle. You help other people, it helps you, and it helps you to remember where you were at if you're helping somebody that's stuck in that. And it helps you to, when you talk to people about it, you talk to people about getting their shit together. You remind yourself that you got to keep your shit together.
Yeah.
And it's not and when you've had a whole lifetime of it, you got to remind yourself a lot. I mean, I even drove out to the prison. I rode my bike out to the prison the other day just so I could look at that gun tower. Just because, just because you don't want to forget. And it's very easy once you've been out for a while to start, thinking that it's not there. It's not, you're not going back. So, but anyway,
It's quick to go back. If you don't work on yourself, then you're no good to anybody else, really. Right?
I agree with that 100%.
So when you're in prison, has there been people with bad charges that come through and what happens to them?